The clock struck 11 as Elena finished mopping the last corner of the 39th floor. She leaned against her cleaning cart and took a deep breath, looking out at the city lights twinkling below through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Hawthorne Tower stood tall and proud in the heart of downtown, home to some of the biggest companies in the country. At this hour, the building was nearly empty, except for the occasional security guard and fellow cleaning staff. Elena rolled her shoulders back, trying to ease the tension that had built up after 7 hours of scrubbing, dusting, and polishing. She had 3 more floors to go, including the penthouse office that belonged to the tower's namesake, Damien Hawthorne. The thought made her sigh. The billionaire tech mogul was rarely there during her shift, but his office was twice the size of the others and always took the longest to clean. "How's it going, Elena?" Jorge, the night security guard, called out as he made his rounds. "Almost done with this floor?" she replied with a tired smile. "Just the big boss's floor left after this one," Jorge chuckled. "Well, at least he's not around tonight. I heard he's at some fancy gala across town." That was good news. Cleaning when the executives were present always made her uncomfortable. They either ignored her completely or watched her every move as if she might steal something. Elena pushed her cart toward the elevator, her worker ID badge swinging from the lanyard around her neck. 5 years ago, she couldn't have imagined this would be her life. Back then, she'd been a promising pianist at Juilliard, with recitals and a bright future ahead of her. But life had other plans. The elevator doors opened to the 42nd floor, the penthouse. Elena stepped out, immediately noticing the difference. The hallway had actual artwork on the walls, not the generic office prints on the lower floors. The carpet was thicker, the lights softer. Everything screamed money. She unlocked the glass doors leading to Hawthorne's private office suite and wheeled her cart inside. The space was immaculate as always. The man might be worth billions, but he was surprisingly tidy for someone who could afford to leave messes for others to clean up. Elena moved methodically through the rooms, dusting the shelves lined with awards and books that looked like they'd never been opened. She emptied the barely filled trash can and vacuumed the already spotless carpet. As she worked, she found herself drawn to the large windows and the spectacular view of the city below. From up here, all the problems down there seemed so small. Was that how billionaires felt all the time? She shook her head and continued cleaning, making her way to the main office. That's when she saw it. The piano she'd heard rumors about but never seen before. It sat in the corner of Hawthorne's private office, gleaming black and magnificent under the soft lighting. A Steinway grand piano, probably worth more than what she'd make in 10 years. Elena froze, her cleaning cloth still in hand. The piano seemed to call to her across the room. How long had it been since she'd touched one? 2 years, 3? After her mom got sick, the piano had been the first thing they'd sold to pay for treatments. Before she knew what she was doing, Elena set down her cleaning supplies and walked toward the instrument. She told herself she just wanted to dust it properly. That was her job after all. But when she stood before it, her hands trembled with the memory of what they used to do. The polished surface reflected her face, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes from working 2 jobs. She barely recognized herself sometimes. Elena glanced at her watch. It was nearly midnight. The building was empty except for security, and they wouldn't come up unless called. No one would know if She pulled out the bench and sat down, adjusting her position out of habit. Her back straightened, shoulders relaxed, hands hovering over the keys. It had been so long, yet her body remembered. For a moment she hesitated, suddenly afraid. What if she'd forgotten how to play? What if all those years of practice had vanished like everything else? Taking a deep breath, Elena placed her fingers on the keys and pressed down gently. The sound that emerged was pure and clear, filling the empty office with life. She played a simple C major scale, then another. Her fingers moved slowly at first, remembering the patterns, finding their way home. A smile spread across her face as she transitioned into a simple melody, one of the first pieces she'd ever learned. It came back to her note by note, like running into an old friend. The tension in her shoulders melted away as she played, and for the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Elena lost track of time as she moved from one piece to another, gradually attempting more complex compositions. When she finally began playing Debussy's Clair de Lune, she closed her eyes, letting the music take over. The notes floated through the office, bouncing off the glass windows and wrapping around her like a warm blanket. She didn't hear the elevator doors open on the floor. Didn't notice the footsteps approaching the office. The music had carried her away to another place, another time, when her future had seemed so bright and full of possibilities. What the hell do you think you're doing? The harsh voice cut through the music like a knife. Elena's eyes flew open, her hands jerking away from the keys as if they'd suddenly turned hot. Standing in the doorway was Damien Hawthorne himself, dressed in an expensive tuxedo with his bow tie undone, looking equal parts surprised and angry. Elena jumped to her feet, nearly knocking over the bench. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hawthorne. I was cleaning and you were playing my piano," he said, stepping into the room. His voice was calmer now, but still cold. "That's a $500,000 instrument, not a toy for the cleaning staff." Heat rushed to Elena's face. She'd never met him in person before, only seen his picture in the company newsletter and occasionally on business news. He was taller than she expected, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to cut right through her. "I apologize," she said, backing away from the piano. "It won't happen again." He studied her for a moment, his gaze moving from her face to the cleaning cart nearby. "You're not supposed to touch anything that isn't part of your job." "Yes, sir, I know. Elena struggled to find words that wouldn't make the situation worse. "I used to play, and it's been a long time, and I thought since no one was here." "You used to play?" His eyebrow raised slightly, skepticism clear on his face. This isn't some secondhand upright. This is a concert grand. Something about his tone, the dismissive way he looked at her as if she couldn't possibly know the difference, made a spark of defiance flare up inside her. Elena straightened her back, her embarrassment giving way to a hint of pride. "I know exactly what it is. Mr. Hawthorne, I studied piano performance at Juilliard before I had to drop out." He seemed taken aback by this information, his eyes narrowing as he reassessed her. "Juilliard? And now you're cleaning offices?" The blunt question stung, but Elena was used to hiding her feelings. "Life happens," she said simply. "Not everyone has a safety net." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Elena wished the floor would open up and swallow her. This was it. She was definitely getting fired. How would she pay rent this month? How would she help her mom with her medications? To her surprise, Hawthorne walked over to the piano and ran his hand along the polished surface. "I've had this for 3 years," he said almost to himself. "It was delivered, tuned, and has sat here ever since. I bought it because someone told me every successful person should have a grand piano in their office." He turned to face her again. "Do you know how many times it's been played before tonight?" Elena shook her head. "0, he said. "Not once. I don't play, and none of my guests have ever shown any interest." He paused, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "What were you playing just now?" "Debussy." "Claire de Lune," she answered. Wondering where this was going, it sounded... He seemed to search for the right word. Good. Coming from him. It wasn't exactly high praise, but Elena nodded anyway. "Thank you." Hawthorne checked his watch and frowned. "It's late. You should finish your work and go home." Elena nodded quickly, relieved that he wasn't immediately calling for security. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry again for—" "Stop apologizing," he cut her off. "And don't touch the piano again without permission. Without permission." The words hung in the air between them. Not "don't touch it ever again," but without permission. Did that mean there could be a time when she would have permission? Before she could process this, Hawthorne walked to his desk and sat down, pulling out his laptop. "I'll be working late tonight. You can clean around me." Elena nodded and quickly gathered her cleaning supplies, her heart still racing. She worked in silence, hyper-aware of his presence as she dusted and vacuumed, careful not to disturb him. Every few minutes she felt his gaze on her, but whenever she looked up, he was focused on his computer screen. As she finished and prepared to leave, she heard his voice again. "What's your name?" She turned, surprised by the question. Elena Martinez." He nodded once as if filing away the information. "Good night, Elena Martinez." "Good night." "Mr. Hawthorne," she replied, wheeling her cart toward the door. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Elena leaned against the wall and let out a long breath. She wasn't fired, at least not yet. But something had changed tonight. Some invisible line had been crossed. Whether it would lead to good or bad, she couldn't tell. All she knew was that for those few precious minutes at the piano, she had remembered who she used to be. And somehow that seemed worth whatever consequences might come. Elena couldn't stop thinking about the piano all week. As she moved through her daily routine, waking up in her small apartment, checking on her mom, working her day job at the cafe, then heading to Hawthorne Tower for her night shift, her mind kept returning to those few minutes of pure joy she'd felt playing again. She cleaned every floor with extra care, partly hoping no one would complain about her work, and partly dreading the moment she'd have to face the 42nd floor again. What if Mr. Hawthorne had reported her? What if she was banned from the penthouse level, or worse, fired altogether? "You're jumpy tonight," Jorge commented as they rode the elevator together. "Everything okay?" Elena forced a smile. "Just tired. End of a long week." The security guard nodded sympathetically. "Well, good news. Most of the big shots are gone for the weekend. Should be a quiet night." Her heart skipped as the elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor. Even Mr. Hawthorne? Especially him. He's at some tech conference in San Francisco until Monday. Relief washed over Elena as she pushed her cart into the penthouse suite. The cleaning would go faster without worrying about being watched. She moved efficiently through the outer office, the conference room, and finally into Hawthorne's private office. The piano sat there, exactly as she'd left it 5 days ago. Elena tried to ignore it as she dusted the bookshelves and wiped down the desk, but her eyes kept drifting back to the gleaming black surface. With Hawthorne away, would it really hurt to play just one more time? She finished her regular cleaning duties first, determined to be professional. Only when everything else was done did she allow herself to approach the piano again. This time she didn't hesitate. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and began to play. Elena started with Bach, her fingers finding the complex patterns of a favorite prelude. The music filled the empty office, and she closed her eyes, letting herself get lost in it. From Bach, she moved to Mozart, then Chopin. Each piece came back to her more easily than the last, as if her hands had never forgotten, had just been waiting for the chance to remember. She didn't notice the time passing, didn't hear the elevator arrive on the floor, didn't see the figure standing in the doorway until she finished a piece and opened her eyes. "Don't stop on my account." Elena nearly jumped out of her skin. Damien Hawthorne stood leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. He wasn't wearing his usual business suit, just dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He looked younger, less intimidating, but still unmistakably the billionaire whose office she'd been caught playing in. "Twice now, Mr. Hawthorne. I thought you were in San Francisco." Elena stood up so quickly she knocked the bench back. "I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have." He held up a hand to stop her apologies. "Conference ended early. I came to pick up some files." He walked into the room, setting a small travel bag on his desk. "That was Chopin, wasn't it?" Elena nodded, her throat dry. "Nocturne in E-flat major. It was nice." He said the word as if testing it out. "You really did go to Juilliard?" It wasn't a question, but Elena answered anyway. "For almost 3 years." Hawthorne moved closer to the piano, studying it as if seeing it for the first time. "Why did you stop?" The question caught her off guard. It wasn't asked with sympathy or even curiosity, just a straightforward request for information. Elena considered giving him the short answer she usually gave people, but something about the moment felt like it called for honesty. "My mom got sick. Cancer. We had some savings, but not enough for the treatments she needed. I had to drop out and work." She shrugged, trying to make it sound matter of fact. "The medical bills took everything, including the piano I'd had since childhood." Hawthorne didn't offer the usual platitudes people gave when they heard her story. Instead, he asked, "And your mother?" "She's okay now. In remission for 2 years." Elena smiled slightly. "Worth every sacrifice," he nodded, his expression thoughtful. "So you clean offices and what else? You must have another job." "I work at Little Bird Cafe downtown in the mornings. Between the 2 jobs, I make enough to cover our rent and her follow-up care." "And when do you practice?" he asked, gesturing toward the piano. Elena laughed, a short, hollow sound. Haven't touched a piano in almost 3 years. Until last week, that is." Something flickered across Hawthorne's face, surprise maybe, or disbelief. 3 years without playing and you can still perform like that?" "Like what?" "Like..." He seemed to struggle for words, unusual for a man known for his articulate speeches and interviews. "Like you never stopped." Heat rose to Elena's cheeks at the unexpected compliment. "Muscle memory, I guess, though I'm rusty on the harder pieces." Hawthorne walked around the piano, running his fingers lightly across its surface. What's the most difficult piece you can play? The question felt like a challenge. Elena thought for a moment. Liszt's La Campanella used to be in my repertoire. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, pieces like that. He raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed despite himself. Then, to her complete shock, he pulled out the bench and sat down. Show me. Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry? Show me, he repeated, moving over to make room on the bench. Play something difficult. I want to see if you're as good as you claim. I never claimed. Juilliard doesn't accept mediocre pianists, he cut in. So either you're exceptional or you're lying. Prove which. The challenge in his voice sparked something in Elena, a competitive spirit she thought had died years ago. She hesitated only a moment before sitting beside him, careful to leave space between them. Fine. But I warned you I'm out of practice. She positioned her hands and began to play. Liszt's La Campanella, one of the most technically challenging pieces in piano literature. The first few measures were shaky as her fingers struggled to remember the complex patterns, but soon muscle memory took over. The rapid notes began to flow more smoothly, her hands flying across the keys with increasing confidence. As she played, she forgot about the man sitting next to her, forgot about the expensive piano, forgot about everything except the music. The piece demanded total concentration, the lightning-fast trills, the huge leaps across octaves, the delicate control needed for the quieter passages. By the time she reached the thundering conclusion, her heart was racing, and a thin sheen of sweat had formed on her forehead. When the final notes faded, the silence felt heavy. Elena slowly became aware of her surroundings again, the dimly lit office, the city lights twinkling outside the windows, and Damien Hawthorne staring at her with an expression of complete astonishment. That was, he started, then stopped, seeming genuinely at a loss for words. Elena waited, suddenly nervous again. Had she made a mistake? Played too aggressively on his expensive instrument? Hawthorne stood up abruptly, walking a few steps away before turning back to face her. If someone could play my piano like that, he said, his voice oddly tight, I'd marry them on the spot. Elena blinked, sure she'd misheard. What? A strange smile crossed his face, half joking, half something else she couldn't identify. It's just an expression, a figure of speech. He waved his hand, dismissively. What I mean is you're wasted cleaning offices. We can't all be tech billionaires. Mr. Hawthorne, Elena replied, trying to keep her voice light despite the sudden tension in the room. No, but you could be a pianist, a real one performing. He looked at her intently. Why aren't you trying to get back to that? The question hit a nerve. Elena stood up, smoothing down her uniform. Because real life isn't a fairy tale. I have bills to pay, a mother to take care of. I can't just drop everything and chase dreams again. What if you could? What do you mean? Hawthorne paced across the office, energy seeming to radiate from him. What if you had a sponsor? Someone to back you while you retrained, auditioned, built your career back up? Elena stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. Are you offering to pay me to play the piano? I'm offering to invest in talent, he corrected. It's what I do. I find potential and I develop it. I'm not a tech startup, Mr. Hawthorne. No, you're potentially more interesting. He stopped pacing and faced her directly. Here's my proposal. You come here 3 times a week and play this piano for 2 hours. In return, I'll pay you double what you make at the cafe. Elena's mind raced. The offer was tempting, so tempting it scared her. Why would you do that? Hawthorne shrugged. Because I can. Because this piano should be played by someone who knows how. Because it's a more worthwhile use of my money than whatever else I'd spend it on this month. And what exactly would be expected of me? Elena asked carefully. His eyebrows shot up, then he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his usually serious face. Just playing the piano, Ms. Martinez. This isn't some questionable proposal. Elena felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. I didn't mean... I know what you meant, and you're right to ask. His expression grew serious again. The arrangement would be simple. You play, I pay. If it works out, maybe we discuss further opportunities. Auditions, connections I might have in the music world. If not, no harm done. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Elena had learned the hard way that nothing came without strings attached. I'll need to think about it. Hawthorne nodded, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a business card. "My personal number. Call me when you decide." Elena took the card, the heavy cardstock feeling strange between her fingers. "And if I say no? Then you keep cleaning offices, I keep having an unplayed piano, and we both go on with our lives." He picked up his travel bag from the desk. "But I don't think you'll say no. Why not?" "Because I saw your face when you were playing." His voice softened just slightly. That wasn't just muscle memory. That was passion. Before Elena could respond, he walked toward the door. "Lock up when you leave." "And Ms. Martinez?" He paused, looking back at her. "Whatever you decide, your job here is secure. I'm not in the habit of firing people for having hidden talents." With that, he was gone, leaving Elena alone in the big office with a half-finished cleaning job, a business card with a private number, and a decision that could change everything. Elena turned the business card over in her hands for the 100th time, the edges now slightly worn from her constant handling. 3 days had passed since Hawthorne's unexpected offer, and she still hadn't called him. The card sat on her kitchen table, a small rectangle of expensive paper that somehow managed to take up the entire room. "You're staring at it again," her mother said, entering the kitchen with slow, careful steps. Rosa Martinez was thin from her years of illness, but her eyes remained bright and observant. "Either call the number or throw it away, but stop torturing yourself." Elena sighed, tucking the card into her pocket. "It's not that simple, Mama. Why not? He's offering to pay you to play piano. Most musicians would jump at the chance. Most musicians don't have a billionaire boss making strange offers out of nowhere." Elena poured her mother a cup of tea. "What if he changes his mind? What if I start depending on this money and then it disappears?" Rosa accepted the tea with a smile. "What if you spend your whole life afraid to take chances and wake up one day full of regrets?" She reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "You gave up so much for me. Maybe this is life giving something back." Elena couldn't meet her mother's eyes. The truth was, she'd already decided to accept Hawthorne's offer. She just couldn't shake the feeling that there was some catch she wasn't seeing. "I'll call him today," she promised, standing up to grab her bag for work. "But I'm keeping both jobs for now, just in case." Her mother nodded, understanding as always. "Smart girl. Now go before you're late." The morning shift at Little Bird Cafe was busy, leaving Elena no time to dwell on her decision. She moved between tables with practiced efficiency, smiling at regulars and jotting down orders. It was honest work, and she'd grown to appreciate the simplicity of it. Take orders, bring food, collect payment, repeat. During her break, she finally pulled out Hawthorne's card and dialed the number before she could talk herself out of it again. He answered on the second ring. "Hawthorne. Mr. Hawthorne, this is Elena Martinez." She twisted the phone cord nervously. "About your offer? You're accepting," he said. It wasn't a question. Elena straightened her shoulders, reminding herself that this was a business arrangement, nothing more. "Yes, on a trial basis. 3 months. If either of us wants to end the arrangement after that, we can." There was a pause, and she could almost imagine him smiling. "Reasonable terms. When can you start?" "Tomorrow evening? After my cleaning shift?" "That works. I'll let security know you're authorized to use my office." His tone was brisk, efficient. "Is there anything else you need to discuss?" Elena hesitated. "Just to be clear about expectations, I'll play whatever you want me to play?" "Play whatever you want," he corrected. "Consider it practice for your eventual return to performing." "I never said I was planning to perform again." "You will." The certainty in his voice was almost irritating. "See you tomorrow evening, Ms. Martinez." The line went dead before she could respond. Elena hung up the phone, wondering if she'd just made a huge mistake or taken the first step toward reclaiming her old dreams. The next day crawled by. Elena went through her usual routine at the cafe, then headed to Hawthorne Tower for her cleaning shift. She worked methodically, floor by floor, trying not to think about what would happen after. By the time she reached the 42nd floor, her stomach was in knots. She cleaned Hawthorne's office quickly, constantly checking the clock. When her shift ended at 11 p.m., she found herself alone in the penthouse, staring at the piano that had somehow changed the course of her life. She changed out of her cleaning uniform in the employee restroom, grateful she'd thought to bring a change of clothes, simple black pants and a blue blouse, nothing fancy, but better than the gray uniform with the cleaning company logo. At exactly 11:15, The elevator doors opened and Damien Hawthorne stepped out. He'd clearly come straight from another meeting, still dressed in a tailored suit, his tie loosened slightly at the neck. "Ms. Martinez." He greeted her with a nod. "Right on time, Mr. Hawthorne." She stood awkwardly by the piano, unsure of the protocol for this strange arrangement. He gestured toward the instrument. "Please begin whenever you're ready." Elena sat down at the bench, adjusting her posture automatically. "Any requests?" "Surprise me." She took a deep breath and began to play. She started with Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the familiar notes helping to calm her nerves. As she played, she became aware of Hawthorne moving around the office. He sat at his desk for a while, looking at something on his laptop. Later, he moved to the leather couch near the window, seemingly absorbed in reading documents from a folder. Was he even listening? Elena pushed the thought away and focused on the music. She transitioned from Beethoven to Schubert, then to a piece by Debussy. The more she played, the more the tension left her body. By the time the first hour had passed, she'd almost forgotten Hawthorne was there. Almost, but not quite. She was acutely aware of his presence even when she couldn't see him directly. Occasionally, she'd catch him watching her with an intensity that made her fingers stumble briefly, before finding their rhythm again. When she finished a piece by Chopin, Hawthorne spoke for the first time since she'd begun playing. "You favor the romantics." Elena's hand stilled on the keys. "They speak to me. All that emotion under strict structure. Play something more modern." She thought for a moment, then began Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, the jazzy rhythms filling the office with a completely different energy. When she glanced up, Hawthorne had moved closer, standing just a few feet from the piano, watching her hands move across the keys. "You're better than I expected," he said when she finished. Elena raised an eyebrow. Is that a compliment or an insult? To her surprise, he laughed. "Both, perhaps. I thought you might be good for someone who hadn't played in years. I didn't expect you to be good, period." He checked his watch. "That's 2 hours. Same time on Thursday?" Elena nodded, suddenly aware of how tired her fingers were. She hadn't played this long in years. "Should I? Will you be here every time?" "Most times," he said, walking back to his desk. "Sometimes I'll be traveling. You'll still have access." He pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. As agreed, Elena took the envelope, feeling strange about accepting payment for something that had once been her greatest joy. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Hawthorne said, his expression unreadable. "This is just the beginning." The next few weeks fell into a pattern. 3 times a week after finishing her cleaning duties, Elena would play the piano in Hawthorne's office for exactly 2 hours. Sometimes he would work while she played, seemingly ignoring her. Other times he would sit and listen attentively, occasionally asking questions about a particular piece or composer. What surprised her most was how quickly her skills returned. Pieces that had felt challenging at first now flowed naturally under her fingers. She began to remember techniques her professors had taught her, nuances in interpretation that made a performance special. One night, about a month into their arrangement, Hawthorne made an unexpected request. "Play something you've composed yourself." Elena's hands froze over the keys. "I don't compose. Never? Not even at Juilliard?" She hesitated. "I tried once or twice. Nothing serious." "Play it anyway." Elena felt uncomfortably exposed, but she began to play a short piece she'd written during her second year of music school. It was simple compared to the masterwork she usually performed, but it had a haunting melody that had always felt deeply personal to her. When she finished, the silence in the room felt heavy. Elena kept her eyes on the keys, afraid to look up and see judgment or, worse, pity on Hawthorne's face. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. She finally looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "It's just a student piece. It's honest." He moved closer, studying her with those intense eyes that always made her feel like he was seeing things she didn't want seen. "Why did you stop composing?" Elena shrugged. "No time, no piano. No point. And now? Now what?" "You have time. You have a piano." He gestured around them. "Do you have a point?" The question unsettled her. "I don't know what you mean." Hawthorne leaned against the piano, his expression serious. "You've been playing for a month now. Your technique has improved remarkably, so what's next?" "I thought this was just about playing your piano." "It was." "It is." He straightened up. "But I told you from the beginning, I invest in potential. You have it. The question is what you want to do with it. Elena stood up from the bench, needing to be on equal footing for this conversation. What exactly are you suggesting? I know people in the music world. Important people. One phone call from me could get you an audition with the symphony, or a recital at a respected venue. He said it casually, as if offering to order her a coffee. And why would you do that? Elena asked, her voice cautious. Hawthorne's expression softened just slightly. Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted cleaning offices and serving coffee. So this is charity? The idea stung her pride more than she wanted to admit. No, he said firmly. This is opportunity. Take it or leave it, but don't insult both of us by calling it charity. Elena felt her cheeks flush. I didn't mean... I know exactly what you meant. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. Think about it. In the meantime, I have a different proposal. Another one? A party. Here at the Tower next Friday. Important clients, industry leaders. He paused. I want you to play. Elena's heart skipped a beat. Play at your party? In front of people? That's generally how performances work, yes. A hint of amusement crossed his face. Unless you're not ready? It was clearly a challenge, and Elena felt herself responding to it despite her reservations. What would I play? Whatever you think best. Something impressive. He handed her another envelope, her payment for the evening. Consider it your debut. As she rode the elevator down to the lobby, Elena realized her hands were shaking. After 3 years of thinking her music career was over, she was being offered a chance to perform again. Not on a grand stage, but for people who mattered in the world of money and influence, and all because a billionaire had caught her playing his piano when she should have been cleaning his office. Life was strange sometimes. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe this was the universe giving something back. Or maybe it was just another chance for her to get her hopes up, only to have them crushed again. Either way, Elena knew she would be at that party. She would play her heart out. And for the first time in years, she would let herself imagine a future where music was more than just a memory. Elena stared at her reflection in the small mirror of her bathroom, barely recognizing herself. The woman looking back at her wore a midnight blue dress that flowed elegantly to the floor, her dark hair styled in soft waves instead of the practical ponytail she usually wore. Her mother had insisted on helping with her makeup, subtle but enhancing her features in a way Elena had forgotten was possible. You look like yourself again, Rosa said, appearing in the doorway behind her. The self I remember from your concert days. Elena turned, suddenly nervous. Is it too much? Maybe I should wear something simpler. Rosa shook her head firmly. You're playing at a billionaire's party for important people. This is exactly right. She straightened the delicate silver necklace around her daughter's neck, a family heirloom they'd managed not to sell during the hardest times. Besides, when you sit at that piano, no one will be looking at your dress anyway. They'll be too amazed by what your hands can do. The taxi ride to Hawthorne Tower felt surreal. Elena had spent the past week practicing intensely, using her lunch breaks at the cafe to study sheet music and mentally rehearse difficult passages. She'd chosen her program carefully, pieces that showcased technical skill but also emotional depth. Still, doubt crept in as the familiar building came into view. These weren't casual listeners. They were wealthy, powerful people used to the best of everything. What if she wasn't good enough? The main lobby had been transformed for the evening. Usually practical and businesslike, tonight it gleamed with subtle lighting, elegant flower arrangements, and waitstaff carrying trays of champagne. Elena clutched her small handbag, feeling out of place despite her dress. Ms. Martinez. She turned to find Damien Hawthorne walking toward her. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look even more imposing than usual. Yet something was different tonight. There was a warmth in his expression she hadn't seen before. Mr. Hawthorne. She nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. You look... He paused, seeming to search for the right word. Different. Elena couldn't help but smile. I'll take that as a compliment. It was intended as one. He offered his arm. Let me show you where you'll be playing. The party wasn't being held in his office as she'd assumed, but in the building's expansive rooftop garden, a space Elena had heard about but never seen. Glass walls protected it from the wind while offering breathtaking views of the city lights below. In the center of the space stood a grand piano even more magnificent than the one in Hawthorne's office. "That's a Bosendorfer," Elena whispered, recognizing the legendary instrument. "They cost—" "I know what they cost," Hawthorne said with a small smile. "I rented it specially for tonight." "You didn't need to do that. I wanted the best." He said it simply, as if it explained everything. "The guests will start arriving in about 20 minutes. You'll begin playing background music as they mingle. Then after dinner, we'll have your featured performance." He hesitated, then added, "Are you nervous?" Elena took a deep breath. "Terrified. Good." When she looked at him in surprise, he explained, "The best performers channel their nervousness into their playing. It gives the music an edge, a vitality that perfect composure can't match." Before she could respond, an event coordinator approached with questions about the seating arrangement, and Hawthorne was pulled away. Elena found herself alone with the magnificent piano. She sat down, running her fingers lightly over the keys, testing the action. It responded perfectly to her touch, the sound rich and resonant in a way that made her heart beat faster. As the first guests began to arrive, Elena started playing soft classical pieces, Debussy, Satie, music that created an atmosphere without demanding attention. She kept her head down, focusing on the keys, but occasionally glanced up to see the room filling with people in expensive clothes, their jewelry catching the light as they laughed and talked. Hawthorne moved among his guests with practiced ease, shaking hands, making introductions. From time to time, his eyes would find hers across the room, and he would give a small nod of encouragement. It helped steady her nerves, this silent communication between them. The dinner portion of the evening passed in a blur. Elena was seated at a table with some of the event staff and a few junior executives who were polite, but clearly uninterested in the pianist hired for the evening. She picked at her food, her stomach too knotted with anticipation to eat much. Finally, the moment arrived. Hawthorne stood and clinked his glass, bringing the room to attention. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the space. "Before we conclude our evening, I'd like to offer something special." He gestured toward Elena. "Many of you have been enjoying the background music provided by Ms. Elena Martinez. What you don't know is that Ms. Martinez is not simply a pianist I hired for the event. She is, in fact, a former Juilliard student of exceptional talent who will now give us a brief recital." A murmur of interest passed through the crowd as Elena made her way back to the piano. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. As she sat down, she caught sight of Hawthorne watching her, his expression impossible to read. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. Then she began to play. Elena started with Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, a piece that began gently but built to a passionate, technically demanding conclusion. As her fingers found their way through the familiar patterns, the nervousness fell away. There was only the music, the connection between her hands and the keys, the story she was telling through sound. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of silence, then enthusiastic applause. Elena looked up to see genuine appreciation on the faces of the audience. Encouraged, she moved directly into her next piece, Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, with its thundering chords and dramatic dynamics. With each piece, she felt herself growing more confident, more alive. This was who she was meant to be. This was what she was born to do. By the time she reached her final piece, Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, she was playing with a freedom and joy she hadn't felt in years. The applause that followed was immediate and overwhelming. People stood from their tables, smiling and clapping enthusiastically. Elena rose from the bench, slightly dizzy with the rush of emotion, and bowed deeply. As the applause continued, she found herself searching the crowd for one face in particular. Hawthorne stood at the back of the room, not clapping but watching her with an intensity that took her breath away. When their eyes met, he gave her a small, private smile that felt more meaningful than all the applause combined. The rest of the evening passed in a whirlwind of handshakes and compliments. Guests approached her one after another, asking about her training, her background, why they hadn't heard of her before. One woman handed her a business card mentioning something about arts patronage. A man who introduced himself as the chair of a foundation talked about upcoming events that needed musicians. Through it all, Elena felt as if she were floating slightly above herself, watching her old dream come back to life in real time. Occasionally, she would glimpse Hawthorne across the room, still attending to his guests but always seeming aware of where she was. As the party began to wind down, Elena found a quiet moment to step away from the crowd. She walked to the edge of the rooftop garden, looking out at the city spread below her like a carpet of lights. The cool night air helped clear her head, bringing her back to reality after the emotional high of performing. "You were extraordinary." She turned to find Hawthorne standing behind her, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. He offered one to her. "Thank you," she said, accepting the glass, "for everything. Tonight was—" She searched for the right word. Magical. It was just the beginning. He joined her at the railing, looking out at the view. "Several people asked me about you." "Important people." Elena took a sip of champagne, letting the bubbles dance on her tongue. "I noticed. I got 3 business cards and an invitation to play at some charity event next month. The director of the symphony was here," Hawthorne said casually. "He asked if you'd be interested in auditioning." Elena nearly choked on her champagne. "The symphony? Are you serious?" "Completely." He turned to face her fully. "This is happening, Elena, if you want it." It was the first time he'd used her first name, and somehow that felt as momentous as the opportunity he was describing. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes." His voice was soft but intense. "Say you'll audition. Say you'll stop cleaning offices and serving coffee and do what you were born to do." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, trying to understand. "Why do you care so much? Why are you doing all this for me?" Hawthorne was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "When I was 10 years old, my father took me to a concert hall for the first time. The pianist that night played with such passion that even as a child I felt it. I went home and begged for piano lessons." He smiled slightly at the memory. "I was terrible. No natural talent whatsoever. But I never forgot how that music made me feel." He turned back to the view, his profile outlined against the night sky. "I've built companies, made billions, achieved everything I set out to do. But I've never created anything that moved people the way your music moved everyone in this room tonight." Elena was stunned by the confession, by this glimpse of something vulnerable beneath his confident exterior. "So this is about living vicariously through me?" she asked, but there was no edge to her question. Hawthorne laughed softly. "Perhaps in part. But it's also about recognizing that some talents are too precious to waste." The last guests were leaving, the staff beginning to clear away glasses and plates. The magical evening was coming to an end. "I should go," Elena said reluctantly. "It's late and I still have the morning shift at the cafe tomorrow. Let me drive you home." When she hesitated, he added, "Please. It's the least I can do after you made my event a success." As they rode down in the elevator together, Elena realized how much had changed in the 2 months since she'd first touched that piano in his office. She had gone from being invisible, just part of the cleaning staff, to having powerful people ask for her contact information. From thinking her music career was dead to standing on the threshold of new possibilities. And it was all because of the man standing beside her, the billionaire who had seen something in her that she'd stopped seeing in herself. 6 months passed in a whirlwind. Elena's life transformed so quickly that sometimes she woke up wondering if it had all been a dream. The morning after Hawthorne's party, she'd given notice at the cafe. 2 weeks later, she left the cleaning company too. Her days now revolved around music, practicing, auditioning, performing. The symphony audition had been terrifying but successful. She didn't win a permanent position, but she became a regular substitute, playing when other pianists were unavailable. It wasn't steady work yet, but combined with private students and small recitals at local venues, she was making enough to support herself and her mother. Through it all, Hawthorne remained a constant presence in her life. Not daily, not even weekly sometimes, but always there in the background, making calls on her behalf, arranging introductions, occasionally attending her performances. Their relationship had evolved into something she couldn't quite define. Not quite friendship, definitely not romance, but a connection based on mutual respect and shared passion for music. Elena still played his piano once a week. Their original arrangement had officially ended, but she continued to visit the penthouse office, partly out of habit and partly because those evenings had become precious to her. Sometimes they barely spoke, with Elena playing while Hawthorne worked. Other times, they'd talk for hours after she finished, discussing composers, performances, or just life in general. Tonight was one of those nights. Elena had just finished playing a piece she was preparing for an upcoming recital, and Hawthorne had poured them each a glass of wine, something that had become part of their ritual in recent months. "You've changed the middle section," he observed, sitting in the leather chair across from the piano. "It's more dynamic now." Elena smiled, impressed by his ear. When they'd first met, he'd barely known one composer from another. Now he could identify subtle changes in her interpretations. "I was worried it felt too repetitive before. It works better now." He took a sip of wine, studying her over the rim of his glass. "Your recital is sold out, by the way." "What?" Elena nearly spilled her wine. "How do you know that?" "I just announced it last week." Hawthorne shrugged. "I know the venue owner. He mentioned it when we spoke yesterday." "When you spoke?" Elena narrowed her eyes. "Please tell me you didn't buy all the tickets." "Of course not." He looked offended at the suggestion. "I only bought 20. Damien." It had taken months for her to start using his first name, and she still only did it when she was exasperated with him. "You can't keep doing things like that." "Why not?" "I have friends who appreciate good music." "Because—" Elena struggled to articulate why his help sometimes bothered her. "Because I need to know I can do this on my own. That people are coming to hear me play because they want to, not because a billionaire asked them to." Hawthorne's expression softened. "Elena, the tickets sold out because of your talent. Your name is starting to mean something in this city. People have heard you with the symphony, at the charity gala last month. They're coming because you're good." She wanted to believe him. The past 6 months had been a dream come true in so many ways. But sometimes she still felt like an imposter, the cleaning lady playing dress-up as a concert pianist. "I got an offer today," she said, changing the subject. "From the Williams Institute. They want me to join their faculty as an associate professor of piano." Hawthorne's eyebrows rose. "That's a prestigious position." "It is. Good salary, benefits, stability." Elena traced the rim of her wineglass with her finger. "Everything I should want, but it would mean less time for performing. Less freedom to accept the kinds of opportunities that have been coming my way." She looked up at him. "What would you do?" "It doesn't matter what I would do. It's your life, your career. I'm asking for your opinion, as a friend." The word felt inadequate, but she didn't know what else to call him. Hawthorne was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think security is overrated," he finally said. "There will always be teaching positions for someone with your talent. But this moment, when your performance career is gaining momentum, that's rare and precious." Elena nodded slowly. It was what she'd been thinking too, but hearing him say it helped crystallize her thoughts. "That's what my mother said too, which surprised me. She's usually the practical one. She understands what makes you happy." Hawthorne stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "You light up when you perform, Elena. I've watched it happen over and over. You become more yourself on stage than anywhere else." The observation struck her deeply because it was true. When she played for an audience, she felt complete in a way she never did otherwise. "I'm going to turn down the teaching position," she decided, "at least for now." Hawthorne turned back to her with a smile. "Good. In that case, I have something for you." He walked to his desk and pulled out an envelope from the drawer. "I was going to give you this after your recital next week, but now seems like the right time." Elena took the envelope cautiously. Inside was a letter on expensive stationery. As she read it, her eyes widened. "The International Piano Competition?" Her voice rose in disbelief. "You nominated me?" "I did." "And they've accepted your nomination." His eyes shone with undisguised pride. "It's the biggest stage, Elena. The kind of opportunity that can launch an international career." Elena read the letter again, her hands trembling slightly. The competition was held every 3 years and attracted the finest pianists from around the world. Even being accepted as a competitor was an honor. Winning was the stuff of dreams. "I can't possibly be ready in time," she whispered. "It's in Milan in 4 months." "You're ready now," Hawthorne said with quiet conviction. "But if you want to prepare more, I've arranged for you to work with Thomas Chen." "The Thomas Chen? The Van Cliburn winner?" Elena's head was spinning. "How did you—" "He owes me a favor." Hawthorne waved his hand dismissively. "The point is, this is your moment, Elena. Everything you've worked for, everything you gave up and then reclaimed, it's all led to this. Elena stood up abruptly, needing to move as emotions overwhelmed her. She walked to the window, trying to process everything. Behind her, she heard Hawthorne pouring more wine. "Why?" she asked, not turning around. "Why have you done all this for me?" There was a long pause. When Hawthorne finally spoke, his voice was different, softer without its usual confidence. "Do you remember the first night we met? When I found you playing this piano?" Elena nodded, still looking out at the city lights. "I came back to the office that night because I couldn't sleep. I just closed a massive deal, the kind that makes headlines, but I felt nothing. Empty." He took a step closer to her. "And then I heard the music. Your music. For the first time in years, I felt something real." Elena turned to face him, struck by the vulnerability in his expression. "That night, watching you play, I realized I'd spent my life pursuing success but had forgotten how to pursue joy." He smiled slightly. "You reminded me. So I'm your personal salvation project?" Elena asked, but there was no bite in her words. "No." Hawthorne shook his head. "You're the most talented, determined, genuine person I've ever met. And helping you reclaim your dream has been the most meaningful thing I've done with my ridiculous fortune." The honesty in his voice touched something deep inside her. Over the months, she'd come to care for him more than she wanted to admit, not just for what he'd done for her, but for the person she'd discovered beneath the billionaire facade. The man who listened intently when she explained why one recording of a Beethoven sonata was superior to another. The man who remembered her mother's birthday and sent flowers. The man who challenged her to be better, to reach higher, to believe in herself. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You don't need to thank me. Just win the competition." His eyes held hers. "Or at least play like you did that first night, like your soul depends on it." "I remember something you said that night," Elena said, a smile playing at her lips. "Something about marrying anyone who could play your piano properly." Hawthorne looked startled, then laughed. "You took that seriously?" "It was just a figure of speech." "I know." Elena stepped closer to him, feeling suddenly brave. But what if it wasn't? The question hung in the air between them. Hawthorne's expression shifted from surprise to something warmer, more intense. "Elena." He said her name like it was something precious. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that somewhere between your ridiculous offer to pay me to play piano in this moment, I fell in love with you." The words felt both terrifying and inevitable. "And I hope you might feel the same way." For once, the always eloquent billionaire seemed at a loss for words. Instead of speaking, he closed the distance between them, cupping her face gently in his hands. When he kissed her, it felt like the resolution of a complex piece of music. All the tension and anticipation of the past months finding release in perfect harmony. When they finally broke apart, Hawthorne rested his forehead against hers. "I do feel the same way," he whispered. "Have for months now. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I needed you to find your path first, to reclaim your career on your own terms." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I didn't want you to ever wonder if you succeeded because of your talent or because of my influence." Elena smiled, understanding completely. It was why she'd always been both grateful for and wary of his help, the fear of losing herself in his world. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now you prepare for the competition. You work harder than you've ever worked. And you show the world what I already know, that you're extraordinary." He kissed her again briefly. "And I'll be in the audience in Milan watching you shine." "And after that?" Elena asked, her heart full of possibilities that would have seemed impossible a year ago. "After that," Hawthorne smiled, "we write our own ending together." As Elena left the tower that night, she thought about how strangely life could turn. 1 year ago, she'd been a cleaner who had given up on her dreams. Now she was preparing for an international competition, building a career she'd thought lost forever, and falling in love with a man who had seen her true self when she was invisible to everyone else, all because she couldn't resist playing a piano that wasn't hers. The city lights twinkled around her as she walked to the subway, a melody already forming in her mind. Not one of the classical pieces she'd perform in Milan, but something new, something that told her own story. Perhaps it was time to start composing again, to create music that spoke of loss and discovery, of second chances and unexpected joy. For the first time in years, Elena felt the future stretching before her, full of music and possibility. And whatever happened next, whether she won the competition or not, whether her relationship with Damien flourished or faltered, she knew one thing for certain: she would never stop playing again.